The Valther Dominion had long been the undisputed conquerors of the galaxy. Their soldiers, engineered for war from birth, stood tall in gleaming black exosuits that pulsed with bioelectric energy. Towering figures with eyes like burning embers, they carried weapons capable of vaporizing entire battalions in seconds. Planets surrendered at the mere sight of their ships blotting out the stars. Resistance was futile, defiance suicidal. Commander Threx surveyed the shimmering display. Before him, aboard the flagship Obsidian Fong, a tactical hologram hovered in the air, depicting the swirling galactic arm they had methodically subjugated over centuries. The next target blinked ominously in crimson at the edge of the map. A backwater planet designated Terra, 3 by the Dominion's cartographers. "Primitive," Threx muttered, his voice a guttural growl that resonated through the command chamber. "Why are we even wasting resources on this rock?" Beside him stood strategist Vokra, a thin, pale figure whose augmentations glowed faintly beneath translucent skin. Vokra's neural implants granted him an unrivaled ability to process data streams from across the fleet. He tilted his head, accessing information on the planet's defenses. Minimal spacefaring capability, outdated projectile-based weapons, fragmented governance. Statistically speaking, conquest will require less than 3 standard rotations, Vokra said with clinical detachment. Threx snorted. 3 rotations? I was hoping for a challenge. The commander had grown weary of hollow victories. The Valther thrived on battle, but their dominance had left them without worthy opponents. Entire worlds now capitulated without firing a shot. Even those that dared resist were swiftly silenced by overwhelming firepower. Still, orders from the Dominion High Council were absolute. Terra 3, or Earth as its inhabitants called it, was strategically valuable, a rich cradle of untapped resources and a prime staging ground for further expansion. The Council cared little for its primitive natives. They were pests to be exterminated or enslaved, depending on their level of cooperation. "Deploy the fleet," Threx commanded. "I want this done swiftly. Show them the wrath of the Valther." The Obsidian Fong shuddered as it engaged its planetary descent thrusters. Around it, a vast armada of warships formed a gleaming phalanx, slicing through the void toward Earth. The invasion had begun. On the planet's surface, humanity remained blissfully unaware of the storm hurtling toward them. But Threx had no interest in their ignorance or innocence. All he saw were soft, fragile creatures clinging desperately to a fragile world. He imagined their terror as his soldiers marched through their cities, their cries drowned out by the hum of plasma rifles and the thunder of war machines. He relished the thought. Yet as the fleet breached the upper atmosphere, something unexpected prickled at the edges of Threx's awareness, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. He couldn't name it immediately, but it gnawed at him like a forgotten memory. "Vokra," he barked. "What's the atmospheric scan showing?" The strategist's eyes flickered as data streamed across his augmented vision. Unremarkable. Standard nitrogen-oxygen mix. No technological anomalies detected. Civilian communication traffic suggests no awareness of our presence. Threx grunted but remained uneasy. Perhaps it was just impatience. Victory was assured of that. He had no doubt. Still, the sensation lingered, a whisper of caution in a mind conditioned for absolute certainty. As the first wave of dropships prepared to deploy, Threx issued his final orders. "No mercy," he said coldly. "Show them why the galaxy fears us." The soldiers in the command chamber thumped their fists against their armored chests in unison, a ritualistic gesture of loyalty and bloodlust. Threx watched them with pride. They were the finest warriors ever created, unstoppable forces of destruction bred for one purpose: conquest. But as the dropships pierced the clouds and descended toward Earth cities, Threx couldn't shake the nagging sensation that this invasion would be different. He dismissed the thought. After all, the Valther feared no one. The skies above Earth split open with thunderous violence as the Valther fleet descended. Massive warships darkened the horizon, their hulls gleaming obsidian against the waning afternoon light. The air rippled with the roar of atmospheric thrusters, drowning out the mundane sounds of human life below. Cities stood paralyzed beneath the ominous shadow of an alien armada, their inhabitants frozen between disbelief and mounting dread. Captain Elena Carter of the 12th Defense Battalion stood atop an observation post just outside the city of Fairview. Through her field binoculars, she tracked the sleek, angular shapes of dropships cutting through the clouds like blades. Each vessel carried dozens of alien soldiers, genetically engineered killers whose reputation had preceded them even to Earth. The emergency broadcast in her earpiece crackled with strained voices. Reports flooded in from across the globe. Coordinated strikes, civilian evacuations, desperate calls for reinforcements. Earth's defenses were already buckling on the sheer scale of the assault. "Elena, command wants your status," barked Lieutenant Harris from below the post. His voice, usually steady, carried a hint of panic. She lowered the binoculars and took a breath to steady herself. "Tell them we're holding position, for now." Harris grimaced. "How long do you think that'll last?" Elena didn't answer. She knew the truth as well as he did. Earth's military forces were fragmented, each nation scrambling to protect its own borders. Against an enemy like this, the odds of survival were laughably slim. But giving up wasn't an option. "Get the marksmen into position," she ordered. "We're going to need every shot to count." The lieutenant nodded and sprinted toward the makeshift command center, his boots kicking up dust. Elena watched him go before turning back to the distant skyline. Plumes of smoke curled into the air where the first waves of Valther troops had landed. The invaders moved with mechanical precision, sweeping through urban centers and industrial zones without mercy. Entire city blocks were reduced to smoldering ruins within minutes. But Earth was no stranger to war, and humanity had always been at its most dangerous when cornered. The first clash between human resistance and Valther invaders erupted on the outskirts of Fairview. The aliens advanced in rigid formations, their energy shields shimmering like translucent barriers against incoming fire. Plasma bolts hissed through the air, vaporizing concrete and shattering vehicles. Human soldiers returned fire with outdated projectile weapons, an arsenal laughably primitive by Valther standards. But what the humans lacked in technology, they compensated for with ingenuity and grit. Guerrilla tactics emerged almost instinctively. Soldiers used the chaotic urban landscape to their advantage, setting ambushes in narrow alleys and collapsing structures onto advancing enemies. And then there were the marksmen, perched on rooftops and concealed behind shattered windows. They waited with eerie patience. Elena had handpicked these sharpshooters herself, each one a master of precision under pressure. Armed with modified long-range rifles, they operated in pairs. One spotter, one shooter. Target acquired. Came a calm voice over the comm channel. It was Sergeant Ben Hayes, one of the best snipers in the battalion. "Take the shot," Elena ordered. A heartbeat later, the sharp crack of a rifle echoed through the city. Down below, a Valther soldier crumpled to the ground. A single bullet punched cleanly through the narrow slit of his helmet. His comrades hesitated, a rare and telling moment of confusion for a force unaccustomed to defeat. Another shot rang out, and another alien fell. "They're breaking formation," Harris reported, his voice laced with disbelief. "They don't know where the shots are coming from." Elena allowed herself a grim smile. The Valther were technologically superior, but they weren't invincible. They had grown arrogant, complacent. They were used to fighting enemies who relied on brute force, not precision. "Keep up the pressure," she said. "Make them afraid to take another step." As the minutes dragged on, the tide of battle began to shift. Valther forces faltered under the relentless precision of human marksmen. Their energy shields, designed to repel plasma and energy-based weapons, proved far less effective against high-velocity projectiles aimed with lethal accuracy. Elena moved through the command post, issuing orders and checking positions. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burning metal. Casualties were mounting on both sides, But for the first time since the invasion began, hope flickered on the horizon. A sudden explosion rocked the ground, sending debris raining down around them. Elena hit the dirt, coughing as dust filled her lungs. Status, she barked into her comm. We're good, but they've brought in heavy artillery, Harris reported. Looks like they're done playing games. Elena clenched her jaw. The Valther were adapting, recalibrating their tactics in response to human resistance. The next wave would be even more brutal, but they had bought themselves time, and time was something they desperately needed. Elena, Hayes' voice crackled over the comm again, this time quieter. More dropships inbound. Looks like they're reinforcing the northern sector. She exhaled sharply. Understood. Hold your position. We'll regroup and hit them hard. The battle for Fairview was far from over, but one thing was clear. The Valther had made a mistake. They had underestimated humanity's resolve, mistaking primitive technology for weakness. They didn't yet understand that Earth's defenders were more than just soldiers. They were hunters, and the hunt had only just begun. The sky above Fairview flickered with the dying embers of alien warships, their sleek forms now scarred and smoldering from coordinated counterattacks. Fires raged through shattered streets, and the acrid scent of burning metal clung to the air. Bodies, both human and alien, littered the ground, silent testimony to the relentless violence that had consumed the city. Captain Elena Carter crouched behind a half-collapsed wall, sweat slicking her brow despite the chill of smoke-filled air. The distant whine of an approaching Valther drone cut through the chaotic soundscape. She motioned sharply to her squad. Hold, she whispered into her comm. Around her, 5 soldiers remained hidden in the rubble, their rifles trained on the sky. The drone skimmed low, its scanning beams sweeping the area with mechanical precision. It was searching for survivors, marking targets for the next wave of alien artillery. Elena steadied her breath, heart pounding in rhythm with the thrum of danger. The Valther were evolving. What had begun as a straightforward invasion had turned into a desperate war of adaptation. Their initial arrogance had been shattered by the surgical precision of Earth's marksmen. But now the enemy was learning. The drone hovered above the ruins, its sensors locking onto something. A red targeting light flickered to life, casting an eerie glow across the debris. Hayes, now! Elena ordered. From a rooftop across the street, Sergeant Ben Hayes squeezed the trigger of his rifle. The shot cracked through the air like a whip, striking the drone dead center. Sparks erupted as it spiraled downward in a flaming arc, crashing into the rubble with a satisfying explosion. Clean hit, Hayes reported calmly over the channel. Elena exhaled sharply. Good work. Keep your eyes open. We're not done yet. The squad shifted positions, moving through the ruins like shadows. Every step was a calculated risk. Every breath could be their last. The Valther had unleashed more than just drones. They had deployed elite hunter squads armed with cloaking technology and enhanced tracking systems. These units were designed for one purpose: to neutralize Earth's marksmen. Elena knew the stakes. The marksmen had become the backbone of human resistance, their precision strikes crippling Valther forces and sowing chaos in the enemy's ranks. But if the Valther succeeded in eliminating them, humanity's fragile foothold would crumble. A burst of static crackled in her earpiece. Captain, we've got movement in North Quadrant, Harris reported. Looks like another patrol. Elena cursed under her breath. The Valther were relentless. How many? 6, no, 8 soldiers. Heavy armor. Understood. Hold your position and wait for my signal. She switched channels. Hayes, you see them? Affirmative, he replied. Got a clear line on 2 of them. The rest are scattered. Elena weighed their options. They couldn't afford to engage in prolonged firefights. Their ammunition was limited, and every bullet had to count. Precision was their only advantage. On my mark, she said quietly. Take the leaders first. We'll handle the rest. The seconds stretched thin, each heartbeat heavy with tension. The Valta patrol moved methodically through the rubble, their black exosuits gleaming ominously. Mark. Hayes' rifle fired twice in rapid succession. The first shot shattered the helmet of the lead soldier, dropping him instantly. The second round found its target in the chest of another, piercing through his shield with deadly accuracy. The remaining Valter hesitated. A fatal mistake. Elena and her squad opened fire, their bullets tearing through armor joints and exposed flesh. In less than 10 seconds, the patrol lay lifeless amidst the ruins. Silence reclaimed the battlefield, broken only by the distant crackle of flames. Status? Elena asked. All clear, Harris confirmed. Elena nodded grimly. The victory was a small one, but it was hard-earned. Every skirmish, every fallen Valter soldier was a step closer to survival. But something gnawed at her. The uneasy feeling that this was only the beginning of a larger push. The Valter weren't just reacting. They were planning. Her earpiece buzzed again, this time with a transmission from Central Command. The voice on the other end was sharp with urgency. Captain Carter, we've intercepted enemy communications. They're massing forces for a full-scale assault on your sector. Elena's stomach tightened. ETA? 2 hours, maybe less. They're bringing everything. She glanced around at her squad, weary but resolute. The city was already on the brink of collapse. Another assault would tear through whatever defenses they had left. But retreat wasn't an option. Not here. Not now. We hold the line, Elena said firmly. Harris looked at her, disbelief flickering across his face. Against a full assault? That's suicide. Maybe, she admitted. But if we fall here, they'll sweep through the region unopposed. We have to give the rest of the world time to regroup. Hayes' voice crackled over the comm again. If they're bringing everything, we better start digging in. Elena managed a grim smile. That's the spirit. As the squad moved to fortify their positions, Elena felt the weight of the coming battle settle over her like a physical burden. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running on borrowed time. But they weren't broken. Not yet. And if the Valter thought Earth's marksmen were finished, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The battlefield was eerily quiet now, save for the distant crackle of fires and the groan of twisted metal. Smoke hung thick in the air, veiling the ruins of Fairview in a grim haze. The Valter had fled. What remained of their forces had abandoned their positions and retreated under the cover of night, their black warships rising like dark specters into the atmosphere. Captain Elena Carter stood amidst the rubble, her rifle slung across her back, dirt and blood streaking her face. She surveyed the scorched landscape, heart heavy with both triumph and loss. The price of victory had been steep. Buildings were reduced to hollow shells. Streets once filled with life, now littered with debris and bodies. But they had done it. They had survived. Carter, Harris called, limping toward her with a grimace. His left leg was bound in a makeshift bandage, the wound barely staunching his blood loss. You should be off that leg, Elena said, her voice rough from exhaustion. He gave a tired laugh. Figured I'd check in before I collapse. He gestured toward the horizon, where the last remnants of the Valter fleet were nothing more than flickering dots in the sky. They're really gone, aren't they? Elena nodded slowly. For now. They never retreat, Harris said, disbelief coloring his tone. What the hell just happened? We broke them, Elena said simply, though the words felt surreal even as she spoke them. We made them bleed, and they realized this wasn't a fight they could win. Harris let out a breathless chuckle. Damn right we did. Across the city, survivors were emerging from bunkers and hidden shelters, their faces etched with disbelief and tentative hope. Medics moved through the wounded, administering aid where they could. The air was filled with muted cries, the sounds of grief mingling with relief. Elena's calm crackled to life. Captain, this is Hayes. Sector's clear. No enemy signatures detected. Good work, Hayes, she said. Stand by for extraction orders. There was a pause, Then Hayes added, "It's over, isn't it?" Elena closed her eyes for a brief moment. "Yeah, it's over." But even as she spoke, she knew the scars of this war would linger. The Valther had come expecting an easy victory, confident in their technological superiority and centuries of conquest. What they hadn't accounted for was humanity's refusal to break, the fierce, stubborn resilience that had defined their species since the dawn of time. The marksman had been the turning point. Against an enemy accustomed to overwhelming force, the precision and patience of human sharpshooters had proven devastating. Elena knew without a doubt that Hayes and his team had saved countless lives. Their bullets had shattered not just alien armor, but the myth of Valther invincibility. As the smoke began to clear, Commander Threx's voice echoed in her memory, a recording intercepted during the battle. "They are not warriors. They are vermin, crude, fragile, insignificant. Yet in the end, it was Threx's forces that had crumbled, his soldiers hunted and defeated by those very vermin." Elena wondered if he was somewhere aboard one of those retreating ships, nursing his wounds and grappling with the bitter taste of failure. Good, she thought grimly. Let him remember this day. "Carter," Harris said, snapping her out of her thoughts. "Command wants a sitrep." She lifted her comm and spoke firmly, despite the exhaustion weighing on her. "Fairview secure. Enemy forces neutralized or in retreat. Casualties significant." Her voice wavered slightly on the last word. "Requesting immediate reinforcements for recovery and medical assistance." "Copy that, Captain," came the response. "You and your team did good work." Elena lowered the comm, the weight of the battle finally settling over her shoulders. She glanced at Harris. "Get yourself patched up." "That's an order." He grinned weakly. "Yes, ma'am." As he hobbled toward the medics, Elena took one last look at the ruins around her. They had won, but it wasn't just about survival. It was about what came next. Humanity had stood on the brink of annihilation and pushed back. They had proven that they were more than just primitive creatures clinging to an insignificant world. They were fighters, survivors, hunters, and now the galaxy would know it too. Elena turned toward the gathering survivors, her resolve hardening. There was still work to be done. Wounds to mend, lives to rebuild. But for the first time since the invasion began, she allowed herself to believe in a future beyond war. The Valther would remember Earth, and if they ever returned, humanity would be ready.